Have you ever been lost before? I'm sure we've all been lost, whether that's at the grocery store or going on a drive somewhere and not knowing where to go. But that's not what I'm talking about. Maybe a better way of phrasing what I'm talking about is, have you ever been stranded somewhere before? For me, I got stranded in the biggest city in America once. You see, my friends from college, them and I, we all decided to go to New York City on a spontaneous road trip. I mean, we were hyped for this. And so we were going on this road trip, and we hopped in the car and got to New York City on a random weekend. And we got there, and we all decided to pitch in so that we could take a train into the city, because that was the cheap way of doing things. And so we went into the city, and man, we had a great time. Man, it was so cool to see all the sights and eat New York City street pizza and be able to go into stores like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. The stores where you can't even afford like a pair of socks, but man, it was just cool to be there, right? And at the end of the day, we were all super tired because we walked like 10 miles because, New York City, you have to walk everywhere. And so we all got back on the train around 11 p.m. And we were like, all right, our stop, somebody told us that our stop was at 11:56. And so we were like, okay, let's do it. We're going to get off the train. We're going to, have everything run smoothly. Nothing has gone wrong yet. But if you know anything about spontaneous trips, that there's always something that is definitely going to go wrong. And so we were riding on the train, and remember, 11:56 is our time. And we saw that 11:30, the train stopped, and then like 11:40 and 11:50. And so it stopped 3 times, and we were like, okay, this has to be our next stop. And so the train stops at 11:57. And so our one friend was like, this is our stop. Let's get off and go. So we all just jumped up without any question of where we were at or what we were doing, and we got off the train. And as we got off, we were all like just celebrating about the day. We was like, man, that was so fun, so happy. We could do this. And then we start looking around at the train station, and we're like, this is not the train station where we got on the train. And we quickly realized that we got off at the wrong stop. And so as we turn around to look at the train, man, the train is already pulling down the track, and we had no chance of catching, anybody on the train. And so we were freaking out. It's midnight in the outskirts of New York City at a random train station where it's like pitch black outside. So we were like, oh my goodness, what to do? And people are kind of pacing around. And I ran up to the train station office and was kind of looking inside, but man, they were closed because, it's midnight. And so we were like, okay, so we were all kind of walking around, freaking out internally, but we had to keep our cool, so nobody would actually have a panic attack. And then we realized that one of our friends brought his laptop on the trip. And so he sat it down, and we plugged in our phones because they were dead from the day. And we ended up getting a hotspot so that the laptop could connect to the Wi-Fi so that we could schedule an Uber to come pick us up at this undisclosed location so that we could get back to where we were going, because we were about 3 miles away from where we were actually supposed to get off the train. And as I thought about it, I realized that I was really counting on my friends to lead me where I was supposed to go. But my friends, they let me down because we ended up, being in the place where we were not supposed to be at all. And, I thought about it a little more and thought, well, they were also counting on me because, not one of us actually checked to see, where are we at? And no one checked our surroundings to see if this was actually our stop. And so as I was counting on my friends, they let me down. But as they were counting on me, I let them down too. Maybe on a more serious note, you've been counting on something recently. And that's your plans. Maybe you've been counting on your spring sport to be there because you worked so hard and you've trained so hard for that. Or maybe you've been counting on your spring production or your spring play to be there because you've rehearsed all your lines or done all the tech work for it. Maybe even more than that, you've been waiting for graduation to come. And you've worked 12 years to get to this exact spot, to walk across the stage and get your diploma. But it's just not going to happen because of the coronavirus. It swept your plans away. Maybe it's something even more simple than that, where it's just simply going to the grocery store or going to the movie theater or shopping with other people or hanging out with friends. The reality is that our plans that we make fail us all the time. But I think the Bible has something to say about how weak our plans are compared to how strong God is. Take a look at Isaiah 40, verse 28. It says this, it says, "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary, and his understanding is unsearchable." Essentially, this verse is saying that God will never leave you and that he never will fail you. He is always there, and he has always been there. He was there from the beginning, and he will be there for you in the end. Yet our plans and the things that we hope in, they leave us all the time, as we can see right now. Ultimately, the big idea I want you guys to come away with today is plans fade, but God stays. Plans fade, but God stays. If we trust in ourselves and we trust in the world and our plans, we will fall and we will fail. The reality is that not much on this earth will be there for you 100% of the time. What's interesting for me personally, as I've seen, during the season, is how the unchangeable has changed. Things like pro sports and all these different things like concerts and big gatherings and even the government meeting together and people meeting together. Like, who would have ever thought that would have gone away? But it changed. And even though that stuff has changed, God doesn't change. You see, God is everlasting, and he knows exactly how you feel right now, and he knows exactly what you fear during these times. And yet he's extremely adequate to meet every single need that you have and every disappointing feeling that you have faced and honestly will ever face. God is extremely adequate to meet your disappointments and to meet your needs. And the best news is that God, he will not quit on you. Let me say that again. God will not quit on you. You see, this verse here, it says that he will not grow weary and he will not faint. And he's always going to be working. He's always going to be there. We've been so used to things quitting on us or things leaving us, like our plans or other people. But God stands by your side at all times. He never leaves or gets tired of you. Why? Because he thinks the world of you. He loves you so deeply, and he's always going to be there for you. What's even better is that God has not stopped working, even though everything else has stopped working. Everything seems to be on pause right now. Everything seems to be frozen. But just because everything else is frozen doesn't mean God is. And I think this is the best news that comes from this, is that God is continually working, but he's continually working for your good, even in this time of quarantine. Plans will fail you, so don't put your hope in that, but put your hope in God, because he is an anchor for our soul. Hebrews 6:19 tells us that God is that anchor, and that because of that, our hope in him is firm and secure. You know, our plans are weak, and as we've seen, they can crumble at any moment. So don't put your trust in those things, but put your trust in God, who is a firm foundation. My friends, don't trust in what fades. Trust in a God who stays. So what about you? Will you choose to trust the God who's everlasting? Or will you choose to trust a life that is ever changing? You know, maybe you've been holding on to expectations and the plans that have been swept away. And because you think that maybe they can make you happy. But now they aren't around and you feel disappointed and worthless. But let me tell you, even though those things are gone, man, you've been left with the greatest thing. You've been left with the God who stays and the God who cares so deeply about you. So I want to ask you two questions. How do you feel when plans change? And how should you feel when plans change? Those are the two questions that I want you to think about. Because oftentimes we can complain when things change. But instead of complaining about how things change, my challenge to you is to pray when things change. Don't complain about how things are changing. Pray when plans are changing. You know, and it can be as simple as a prayer as, God, I know you stay. And I don't want to trust in these plans that are constantly fading. So that I need you to help me to trust in you who is everlasting instead of trusting in a life that is ever changing. Man, I want to challenge you right now, right after this video, to pray that prayer and to truly mean it. Because there's going to be disappointments all the time. But if we pray that prayer, it gives us perspective on these times and the fact that God is truly the best thing for us, not our plans that we had. So this week, whenever your plans change, remember that prayer. Remember that prayer to say, hey, I'm going to trust in the God who is everlasting, the God who will never quit on me, instead of a life that has constantly been quitting on me. No matter what fades in the world, know that you can trust in a God who is there for you at all costs.